I never thought I'd have to choose between watching my son being wheeled into emergency heart surgery or joining a conference call that could determine if we could pay for that very surgery. But there I was, in a sterile hospital hallway, tears streaming down my face as I whispered into my phone, "Yes, I can present the quarterly numbers. Just give me 5 minutes to say goodbye to my son first." That moment broke something inside me, but it also sparked a fire that would ultimately change an entire company's culture. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Winters, and until last year, I was a senior account manager at Pinnacle Marketing Group in Seattle. I spent nearly 8 years there, building my reputation as the go-to problem solver, the woman who could salvage failing client relationships and turn around the most difficult campaigns. I prided myself on my dedication, the late nights, the weekend work, the vacation days cut short for emergency client meetings. In my performance reviews, they called me relentlessly reliable. At family gatherings, my husband Jason would joke that I was married to my job first and him second. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom condo in Ballard, not fancy but comfortable, with a small balcony overlooking the marina where we'd drink coffee on Sunday mornings. Jason worked as an elementary school art teacher, and we had one son, Ethan, who was 7 years old and obsessed with space, dinosaurs, and his collection of rocks that he kept meticulously labeled in shoeboxes under his bed. Our life wasn't extravagant, but it was ours, and we were happy. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs of the toxic workplace I'd normalized. The expectation to answer emails at 11 p.m., the unspoken rule that taking a full lunch break showed a lack of commitment, the subtle competition among team members for who could arrive earliest and leave latest. But when you're in it, breathing that air every day, it just becomes normal. You think everyone works like this, that this is what success requires. I remember the morning everything changed with perfect clarity. It was a Tuesday in October, crisp and bright, the kind of fall day that makes you grateful to live in the Pacific Northwest. I was preparing for a client presentation when Ethan complained of feeling dizzy at breakfast. He'd been unusually tired for weeks, but we'd attributed it to the excitement of starting second grade. This time was different. His face was pale, his lips had a bluish tint, and when he tried to stand, he stumbled. Jason and I exchanged a look of pure parental fear. We rushed Ethan to the emergency room, me still in my presentation clothes, clutching my laptop bag out of habit. The triage nurse took one look at Ethan and rushed us through. Within minutes, he was surrounded by medical staff, his tiny body connected to monitors, his frightened eyes finding mine across a sea of scrubs and white coats. After a blur of tests, Dr. Sharma sat us down in a small consultation room with walls painted a pale, ineffective yellow that I suppose was meant to be soothing. His expression was grave but kind. "Your son has a congenital heart defect," he explained gently. Specifically, a ventricular septal defect with pulmonary hypertension. It appears he was born with a hole between the lower chambers of his heart, but it's only now becoming symptomatic as he's growing and becoming more active. I felt Jason's hand grip mine. "What does that mean for Ethan?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear I could feel radiating from him. "He needs surgery," Dr. Sharma said. "The hole needs to be repaired before the increased blood pressure in his lungs becomes permanent. I'd like to schedule the procedure for Friday morning." Friday, 3 days away. The same day as my presentation to Meridian Global, a potential client worth $5 million in annual revenue to Pinnacle. "Will he be okay?" I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. "With surgery, the prognosis is excellent," Dr. Sharma assured us. "Children are remarkably resilient, but we shouldn't delay." A nurse entered with a clipboard full of forms. "We'll need to discuss financial arrangements," she said. "The estimated cost for the surgery and hospitalization is approximately $127,000. What type of insurance coverage do you have?" My stomach dropped. Our insurance was decent, through my job at Pinnacle, but it had a high deductible plan. We would be responsible for $30,000 out of pocket before coverage kicked in, and even then, we'd be looking at another $15,000 or so in coinsurance. We'll figure it out," I stammered, already mentally cataloging our savings, the equity in our condo, retirement accounts we could borrow against. As they wheeled Ethan to a room for observation, I stepped into the hallway and called my direct supervisor, Marcus Reed. "Rebecca," he answered on the first ring. "Where are you? The Meridian prep meeting started 10 minutes ago." "Marcus, I'm at Seattle Children's Hospital," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "My son Ethan has a heart condition. He needs emergency surgery on Friday." There was a pause, then, "Friday? As in the day of the Meridian presentation?" I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall for support. "Yes, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to make it. Ethan's surgery is scheduled for 7 a.m. "Rebecca," Marcus said, his voice dropping to that particular tone managers use when they're about to say something they know is unreasonable. "You understand the significance of this client, right? This account would put us in contention for the Henderson Award. Your fourth quarter performance bonus is tied directly to landing Meridian. The performance bonus, $22,000. The exact amount we'd need to cover a significant portion of Ethan's medical expenses." "I understand the importance," I said carefully. "But my son—" "No one's saying your son isn't important," Marcus interrupted. "But surely you can make both work. The surgery is in the morning, right? Our presentation isn't until 2 p.m. You could come straight from the hospital." I felt a surge of anger so powerful it momentarily took my breath away. "Marcus, my 7-year-old son is having open heart surgery. I will be at the hospital." "Rebecca, I need to be blunt here. If you're not at that presentation, I can't guarantee your bonus. And given the current economic climate, I can't promise there won't be larger consequences." The threat hung in the air between us. In that moment, I should have told Marcus exactly where he could put his presentation. I should have hung up and turned my attention fully to my son, who needed me more than Pinnacle Marketing Group ever would. Instead, I heard myself say, "Let me see what I can figure out." I returned to Ethan's room where Jason sat beside our son's bed, reading him a story about astronauts. Ethan's face lit up when he saw me, and the guilt I felt was almost physically painful. "Mommy, Dr. Sharma says they're going to fix my heart so I can run as fast as Michael in gym class," Ethan said, his voice excited despite the IV in his arm. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I forced a smile. "That's right, buddy. You'll be zooming around in no time." That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Jason and I stepped into the hallway to talk. "What did your boss say?" he asked. I hesitated. "He reminded me that the Meridian presentation is on Friday." Jason's expression hardened. "You told him you won't be there, right?" "Of course," I said quickly, then added, "But the fourth quarter bonus is tied to landing this client. That's $22,000, Jason. Money we need for Ethan's medical bills." "So, what are you saying?" I stared at the linoleum floor, unable to meet his eyes. "I don't know. Maybe I could step out while Ethan's in surgery. Do the presentation remotely from here." Jason's silence made me look up. The disappointment in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. "Becca," he said finally, "our son is having his chest opened up. His heart stopped and restarted. He needs both his parents here, 100%. "I know that," I whispered. "But what if we can't pay for it? What if we lose the condo?" What kind of mother am I if I can't provide for him? Jason pulled me into a hug, and I felt his tears on my cheek. We'll figure it out. Payments, loans, whatever it takes. But Ethan needs you here on Friday. I nodded against his shoulder, but a seed of doubt had already taken root. The next morning, I woke to an email from Marcus with the subject line, "Compromise Solution." He proposed that I participate in the Meridian presentation virtually from the hospital. He'd handle the in-person aspects, but I would need to present the market analysis and campaign strategy, the core of the proposal and the parts Meridian was most interested in. This way, he wrote, you can be there for your son and still secure your bonus. I've already cleared it with Diane. Diane Hoffman was the executive director, Marcus's boss. I showed the email to Jason, expecting him to be upset. Instead, he looked resigned. Maybe this is the best compromise, he said quietly. If you can do it from Ethan's room while he's in surgery. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of relief and shame. I replied to Marcus agreeing to his proposal. Over the next 2 days, I lived in a surreal split reality. During the day, I sat by Ethan's hospital bed, helping him name the space stations he built from Legos brought from home, explaining what would happen during his surgery, and assuring him that while his superhero scar might hurt for a while, he'd feel so much better afterward. At night, after he fell asleep, I huddled in the visitor lounge, revising slides and rehearsing my presentation. Nurses would find me there at 2 a.m., eyes red from staring at my laptop screen, and gently suggest I get some rest. But rest seemed impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, pale and frightened, or Marcus's thinly veiled threats about my job security. Thursday evening, the night before both the surgery and the presentation, I received a call from Diane Hoffman herself. "Rebecca," she said without preamble, "I understand you'll be calling in to the Meridian presentation tomorrow." "Yes," I confirmed, stepping out of Ethan's room so I wouldn't wake him, "while my son is in surgery." "Good," Diane said briskly. "I appreciate your commitment. Marcus tells me you've been working from the hospital all week." Something in her tone made me pause. It wasn't concern for my son. It was approval of my dedication. "Ethan needs open-heart surgery," I said slowly. "It's serious." "Of course it is," Diane replied. "And as a mother myself, I understand. But I also built my career by never letting personal matters interfere with professional obligations. That's why I'm where I am today." I wondered if she meant this to be encouraging. Instead, it sent a chill through me. "I'll do my part tomorrow," I promised, my voice hollow. "I know you will," Diane said. "That's why we're counting on you to close this deal. The whole team is depending on you, Rebecca." After we hung up, I stood in the dimly lit hospital corridor for a long time. Through the window of Ethan's room, I could see his small form curled up under the blankets, his favorite stuffed triceratops clutched against his chest. In less than 12 hours, surgeons would stop his heart to repair it. And Pinnacle expected me to sell marketing strategies while waiting to hear if my son would live or die. For the first time, I allowed myself to recognize the sheer cruelty of what was being asked of me. Friday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. The surgical team came early to prep Ethan, explaining each step in child-friendly terms. Dr. Sharma reviewed the procedure with us one final time, his confidence reassuring. "We'll take good care of him," he promised. "The surgery should take about 4 hours, and then he'll go to recovery. A nurse will update you hourly." At 6:45 a.m., it was time. They gave Ethan the pre-surgical sedative, and his eyelids grew heavy. "I love you, Mommy," he mumbled, already drifting off. "Will you be here when I wake up?" "I'll be right here," I promised, kissing his forehead. "Mommy and Daddy will be waiting for you." As they wheeled him away, Jason and I held each other, both of us crying openly now. The doors to the surgical wing closed behind our son, and I felt a physical pain in my chest, as if my own heart were being operated on. Jason and I found seats in the surgical waiting area. He pulled out a book but just stared at the same page for 30 minutes. I checked my phone. It was 7:30 a.m. The Meridian presentation was at 2 p.m., 6.5 hours away. At 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Sending final slides now. Review ASAP and confirm receipt. At 9:22 a.m., a nurse came out to tell us the surgery was proceeding, as expected. Ethan was stable. At 10:05 a.m., Marcus called. Just checking that you're still good for 2 p.m. Diane will be introducing you remotely, so be sure your background looks professional. I glanced around the hospital waiting room with its outdated magazines and vending machines. I'll find somewhere appropriate, I said mechanically. At 11:30 a.m., the nurse returned. Ethan is doing well. They're beginning to close now. Should be another hour or so. Jason squeezed my hand, relief evident on his face. I squeezed back, but my mind was already calculating. If the surgery finished around 12:30 p.m., Ethan would be in recovery. I could do the presentation at 2 p.m. and then be there when he woke up fully from the anesthesia, which Dr. Sharma had said might take several hours. The math made sense. The feeling didn't. At 12:42 p.m., Dr. Sharma emerged, still in his surgical gown, but with his mask pulled down. His face broke into a tired smile. The surgery was successful, he announced. We repaired the hole completely. Ethan's heart is working beautifully now. The rush of relief made me lightheaded. Jason and I embraced, both sobbing with gratitude. Can we see him? Jason asked. He's in recovery now, Dr. Sharma explained. You can see him in about 30 minutes, but he'll be heavily sedated for several more hours. I checked the time. 12:45 p.m. If I set up in one of the private consultation rooms, I could do the presentation and then join Ethan in recovery before he was fully conscious. I need to step away for a bit, I told Jason quietly. For the presentation. The disappointment returned to his eyes, but he nodded. I'll stay with Ethan. I'll text you if anything changes. I found a small consultation room and asked permission to use it. The nurse, seeing my red-rimmed eyes and professional clothes that looked increasingly out of place in the pediatric cardiac ward, gave me a sad smile and unlocked the door. Just for a little while, she said kindly. Family consultation. Rooms are reserved for doctors to speak with families. Thank you, I said. It's important for my family. I set up my laptop, adjusted the hospital chair to look more like an office setting, and touched up my makeup as best I could. At 1:55 p.m., I joined the video call. Rebecca! Marcus exclaimed, when my face appeared on screen. Excellent timing. How's your boy? He made it through surgery, I said, unable to keep the emotion from my voice. He's in recovery now. Wonderful news, Marcus said quickly. Now, Meridian's team is arriving as we speak. You'll present after Diane's introduction, starting around 2:10 p.m. The next hour passed in a blur. I spoke about market penetration strategies and demographic analyses, ROI projections, and creative approaches. I answered questions thoughtfully, professionally, as if I weren't sitting in a hospital where my son lay unconscious with his chest sutured closed. The Meridian team seemed impressed, especially with the customized campaign concept I'd developed, specifically for their brand identity. Throughout it all, I kept my phone visible, waiting for updates from Jason. At 2:47 p.m., a text came through. Nurse says he's starting to wake up a little. Asking for you. I felt physically ill but pushed through the last few slides. At 3:03 p.m., as the Meridian CEO was asking about implementation timelines, another text appeared. He's crying for you. Excuse me, I said, interrupting the CEO, mid-sentence. I need to end this call. My son is awake from heart surgery and asking for me. Without waiting for a response, I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and rushed to the recovery area. Jason met me at the door, his expression a mixture of relief and reproach. "He was so confused when he didn't see you," he said quietly. Ethan lay in the recovery bed, his small body connected to monitors and IV lines. His face was pale, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. "Mommy," he croaked, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "You weren't here." I felt something break inside me as I took his hand, so small with a pulse oximeter clipped to his finger. "I'm here now, baby. Mommy had to do something for work, but I'm not leaving again. I promise." Ethan drifted back to sleep, still holding my hand. I sat beside him for hours, watching his chest rise and fall, each breath a miracle. Jason brought me coffee and sat on the other side of the bed. Our family reunited, but changed. My phone buzzed periodically with messages from Marcus and Diane, but I ignored them all. In that hospital room, watching my son fight his way back, from the edge, my priorities crystallized with perfect clarity. No job was worth this. No bonus could compensate for these moments I'd nearly missed. It wasn't until the following Monday that I finally checked my work emails. There were dozens, ranging from congratulatory to concerned to increasingly irritated. The final one, sent Sunday night from Diane herself, had the subject line, "Urgent. Your absence is noted." The message was brief. "Rebecca, while we understand your personal situation, your abrupt departure from the Meridian presentation was unprofessional and potentially cost us the account. Please come to my office at 9 a.m. tomorrow to discuss your commitment to Pinnacle and your future with the company." I showed the email to Jason. We were still at the hospital, where Ethan was expected to remain for at least another 3 days. "You're not going," he said firmly. It wasn't a question. "No," I agreed. "I'm not." Instead, I spent that evening doing something I should have done much earlier. I documented everything, every call, every text, every email from the past week. I created a timeline showing how Marcus and Diane had pressured me to work during my son's heart surgery. I gathered the medical records showing the seriousness of Ethan's condition. I even had the nurse write a statement confirming that I had used a family consultation room for a business meeting while my son was in recovery. Then, I composed an email of my own, addressed not to Diane or Marcus, but to Eleanor Wellington, the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Group. "Dear Ms. Wellington," I wrote, "I'm writing to bring to your attention a serious issue of workplace ethics and family medical leave violations that occurred over the past week." I attached my documentation and sent the email at 8:30 a.m. Monday morning, exactly 30 minutes, before I was supposed to be in Diane's office. By 8:45 a.m., my phone was ringing. It was Eleanor Wellington's executive assistant, requesting a video call with the CEO at 10 a.m. When Eleanor's face appeared on my screen, I was sitting beside Ethan's hospital bed. She looked troubled. "Mrs. Winters," she began, "I've reviewed your email and the accompanying documentation. Before I say anything else, how is your son?" The simple human question, so different from the corporate calculations of Marcus and Diane, brought tears to my eyes. "He's recovering," I said. "The doctors are pleased with his progress." "I'm very glad to hear that," Eleanor said, and I could tell she meant it. "What happened to you last week should never have occurred at Pinnacle or any workplace. The pressure placed on you during a family medical emergency violates not only our stated company values, but potentially several labor laws." I nodded, relief washing over me that someone in leadership finally understood. "I've initiated an immediate investigation," Eleanor continued. "In the meantime, I want you to know that your position is secure and your full quarterly bonus will be paid regardless of the Meridian outcome. Furthermore, I'd like to extend an additional 4 weeks of paid family medical leave so you can focus entirely on your son's recovery." I was speechless. After a week of fighting for basic human decency, this felt almost surreal. "Thank you," I managed finally. That means more than I can express. Eleanor's expression became more serious. I founded this company 20 years ago as a working mother who couldn't find an agency that respected family obligations. Somewhere along the way, it seems some of our leadership has lost sight of those founding principles. I'm grateful you had the courage to bring this directly to my attention. After we disconnected, I sat holding Ethan's hand, watching him sleep peacefully. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe freely. The investigation moved quickly. By Wednesday, both Marcus and Diane had been placed on administrative leave. By Friday, as Ethan was being discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health and instructions for follow-up care, I received another call from Eleanor. "Rebecca," she said, "I wanted to update you personally. The investigation confirmed everything in your documentation. Both Marcus Reed and Diane Hoffman have been terminated for violation of company policies and creation of a hostile work environment." I sat down on our couch, Ethan resting beside me with his favorite dinosaur books. "I never expected that outcome," I admitted. "Their behavior was indefensible," Eleanor said firmly. "But it's also revealed a larger cultural problem that I take full responsibility for. When you're ready to return to work, I'd like to discuss a new position we're creating, Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness. I believe your experience makes you uniquely qualified." Jason, who was listening nearby, raised his eyebrows in surprise. I felt equally stunned. "I would be honored to discuss that," I said carefully. "Excellent. Take all the time you need with your family first. Your job will be waiting." As Ethan continued to heal over the following weeks, I reflected on how quickly life can change, both for worse and for better. One moment, you're attending a routine client meeting. The next, you're rushing your child to the emergency room. One day, you're fearing for your job. A week later, you're being offered a promotion to help change the very culture that failed you. The bonus payment arrived as promised, covering a significant portion of our medical expenses. Eleanor also ensured that Pinnacle's insurance policy was amended to provide better coverage for dependents with congenital conditions. 6 weeks after Ethan's surgery, I returned to Pinnacle headquarters for the first time. The atmosphere felt noticeably different. People smiled more genuinely. Several colleagues shared their own stories of times they'd felt forced to choose between family and work. In my new role as Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness, my first initiative was to establish the Family First Response Protocol, a comprehensive policy ensuring that no employee would ever again be pressured to work during a family medical emergency. The protocol included extended paid leave, automatic bonus protection, and a clear statement that family well-being always takes precedence over business demands. Today, Ethan is a thriving 8-year-old who proudly shows his superhero scar. To anyone who asks, his energy levels are better than ever, and last month he finally outran Michael in gym class. Sometimes I look back at who I was before, the woman who almost missed her son waking up from heart surgery because she was presenting marketing slides, and I barely recognize her. That woman was trapped in a toxic system that convinced her professional dedication required personal sacrifice. The truth I discovered is simpler. No job is worth missing life's critical moments. No bonus is worth your peace of mind. And sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't end your career. It transforms it into something better than you could have imagined. If you're facing impossible choices between work and family, please know this: document everything. Know your rights, and remember that sometimes the people at the very top of an organization may actually want to know when the system is broken. Because I discovered that speaking truth to power isn't just about personal justice. Sometimes it's how entire workplace cultures begin to change. The days following Ethan's surgery blurred together in a haze of hospital routines. Morning rounds, medication schedules, physical therapy sessions, and the constant beeping of monitors became our new normal. I slept on a narrow cot beside his bed, waking at every noise, every nurse's entrance. every small sound Ethan made in his sleep. The incision on his chest, a neat line surrounded by fading bruises, seemed both miraculous and terrifying. So small a mark for such a monumental procedure. Jason brought fresh clothes and home-cooked meals, determined that I shouldn't survive on vending machine snacks and cafeteria sandwiches. He returned to teaching after 3 days, having exhausted his limited personal leave, but spent every evening and weekend at the hospital with us. His students made get-well cards for Ethan, childish drawings of hearts with band-aids and smiling stick figures that we taped to the hospital room walls. I hadn't responded to any work emails since walking out of the Meridian presentation. My phone filled with increasingly urgent messages, first from Marcus questioning my unprofessional departure, then from HR requesting documentation for my absence, and finally from Diane herself demanding my immediate return. Each notification sent a wave of anxiety through me, but I silenced them all, focusing solely on Ethan's recovery. On Wednesday morning, 4 days after the surgery, I was helping Ethan with a puzzle when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Eleanor Wellington, Pinnacle CEO. My hand trembled as I answered. "Hello, Ms. Wellington," I said, stepping into the hallway so Ethan wouldn't hear my conversation. "Rebecca, I've been trying to reach you," Eleanor said, her tone surprisingly gentle. "How is your son doing?" I leaned against the wall, caught off guard by her concern. "He's recovering well. The surgery was successful." "I'm very glad to hear that," she said. "I've just finished reviewing the documents you sent, along with some internal communications I requested from IT. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible. Would tomorrow morning work? I understand if you can't leave the hospital, I'd be happy to come to you." The CEO of a $50 million marketing agency offering to come to the hospital? I could hardly process it. "That won't be necessary," I said. "Ethan's father will be here in the morning. I could meet you at 10 a.m. at your office." "Perfect. My assistant will expect you." The next morning, I dressed in the only professional clothes I had with me, a wrinkled blouse and slacks that had lived in my hospital bag for days. I applied minimal makeup in the hospital bathroom mirror, noting the dark circles under my eyes and the pallor that came from too many nights of interrupted sleep. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" Jason asked as he settled into the chair beside Ethan's bed. "It could wait." I shook my head. "Better to face it now. Besides, I need to understand where I stand with the company." What I didn't say was that we desperately needed my job and health insurance to cover Ethan's ongoing care. Pinnacle Marketing Group occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown high-rise with views of Elliott Bay. I'd always felt a sense of pride walking through those glass doors, belonging to a company with such an impressive address. Today, I felt only apprehension as the elevator carried me to the executive floor. Eleanor's assistant, a young man with a kind smile, greeted me immediately. "Mrs. Winters, please go right in. Ms. Wellington is expecting you." Eleanor Wellington had founded Pinnacle 23 years ago, growing it from a one-woman consultancy to one of the Pacific Northwest's premier marketing agencies. Now in her early 60s, she maintained the sharp style and direct manner that had made her a legend in the industry. She rose from behind her desk when I entered, extending her hand. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. Please sit down." She gestured to a comfortable seating area rather than the more formal chairs facing her desk. "Can I offer you some coffee or tea?" "Coffee would be wonderful," I admitted. "I've been surviving on hospital cafeteria brew." Eleanor smiled sympathetically and asked her assistant to bring us both coffee. Once we were settled with steaming cups, she opened a folder on the table between us. "I want to start by saying how deeply troubled I am by what happened to you," she said, her blue eyes meeting mine directly. "The treatment you received from Marcus and Diane was unacceptable on every level, professionally, ethically, and legally." I sat very still, hardly daring to breathe. This was not the response I had expected. "Your documentation was thorough," Eleanor continued, "but I also reviewed internal communications between Marcus and Diane regarding your situation. They were—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully, revealing of a callousness that has no place in this company. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. What happens now? As of this morning, both Marcus Reed and Diane Hoffman have been placed on administrative leave pending a fuller investigation, but I believe the evidence is clear enough that their positions at Pinnacle are untenable. I nearly spilled my coffee. "You're firing them?" "I prefer to say we're parting ways," Eleanor said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But yes, essentially. What they did goes against everything Pinnacle should stand for. They pressured an employee to work during a life-threatening family medical emergency, threatened her job security, and attempted to withhold earned compensation as leverage." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Rebecca, I founded this company as a working mother who couldn't find an agency that respected family obligations. Somewhere along the line, that core value seems to have been lost in parts of our organization. I'm determined to correct that." Relief washed over me so strongly it felt physical, like a weight lifted from my chest. "Thank you for taking this seriously," I managed. "I'm not finished," Eleanor said. "Effective immediately, your full quarterly bonus will be paid regardless of the Meridian outcome. You'll also receive 4 weeks of paid family medical leave to focus on your son's recovery. Your position will be waiting for you when you're ready to return." Tears welled in my eyes. The bonus alone would cover most of our outstanding medical bills. The additional paid leave meant I wouldn't have to choose between Ethan's care and our financial stability. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "There's nothing to say," Eleanor replied. "This is simply what should have happened in the first place." She set her coffee down. "But I'd like to discuss something else with you if you're open to it." I nodded, wiping away tears. "This situation has revealed a cultural problem that I take full responsibility for," Eleanor said gravely. "If this happened to you, one of our most valued senior managers, I have to wonder what other employees might be experiencing." She pulled a document from her folder and handed it to me. "This is a proposal for a new position, Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness. The role would report directly to me and be responsible for reviewing our policies, implementing new support systems, and serving as an independent advocate for employees facing work-life challenges." I scanned the document, noting the comprehensive job description and the generous salary figure, nearly 30% more than my current compensation. "I believe your experience makes you uniquely qualified," Eleanor continued. "You understand firsthand how high-pressure work environments can create impossible choices for employees, and you've demonstrated remarkable courage in speaking up." I looked up from the document, stunned. "You want me to take this position?" "When you're ready," Eleanor confirmed. "Take all the time you need with your family first. Think about the opportunity. The job will be waiting." I left Pinnacle that day feeling like I'd stepped into an alternate reality. Instead of being reprimanded or terminated, I'd been validated, compensated, and offered a promotion. The relief was so overwhelming that I sat in my car in the parking garage for several minutes, hands shaking before I could drive back to the hospital. When I returned to Ethan's room, Jason took one look at my face and raised his eyebrows. "Well?" I told him everything: the administrative leave for Marcus and Diane, the guaranteed bonus, the extended paid leave, and the job offer. "They're creating a whole new position for you?" he asked, incredulous. "To help change the culture," I confirmed. "Eleanor says she wants to get back to the company's original values." Jason shook his head, smiling. "Karma works faster than I thought." It's not about karma," I said, settling into the chair beside Ethan's bed and taking his small hand in mine. He was sleeping peacefully, his breathing even and strong. "It's about having the courage to speak up when something is wrong." "Moderate." Next day, Ethan's surgical team cleared him for discharge. Dr. Sharma reviewed his home care instructions with us, outlining medication schedules, activity restrictions, and follow-up appointments. "He's doing remarkably well," the surgeon assured. "Us children are incredibly resilient. Within a few months, he should be able to return to all normal activities." As we packed up Ethan's things, a nurse brought in an envelope. "This came for you at the front desk," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a card signed by Eleanor and the Pinnacle executive team, along with a generous gift card to a meal. Delivery service. The note read simply, "Focus on your family. We'll be here when you're ready." That evening, settling Ethan into his own bed for the first time in over a week, I felt a profound sense of peace. The fear that had been my constant companion, fear for my son's health, fear for our financial security, fear for my professional future, had finally begun to ease. "Mommy," Ethan said as I tucked his dinosaur comforter around him, "am I all better now?" I sat on the edge of his bed, gently touching the bandage still covering his incision. "Your heart is all fixed," I told him, "but your body needs time to heal completely. That's why you need to rest and take it easy for a while." He nodded solemnly. "Like when you repot a plant, you have to be gentle until the roots get strong again." I smiled at his perfect analogy, courtesy of his science teacher father. "Exactly like that." "Are you going back to work tomorrow?" he asked, a hint of anxiety in his voice. "No, sweetheart," I assured him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "I'm staying home with you until you're much stronger. My boss said I should take all the time I need." His face relaxed. "Good, because I need you here." Those 5 simple words crystallized everything for me. I need you here. Not the office, not the clients, not the presentations or campaigns or quarterly targets. My son needed me, and for once, I could be fully present for him without professional consequences hanging over my head. The bonus payment arrived in my account the following Monday, $22,000, exactly as promised. I sat at our kitchen table, staring at the bank balance on my laptop screen, while Ethan napped on the couch nearby. The amount would cover most of our outstanding medical bills, with enough left to maintain our regular expenses during my leave. I called the hospital billing department immediately to arrange payment, feeling a weight lift with each dollar allocated toward Ethan's care. The financial coordinator sounded almost as relieved as I felt. "This is wonderful, Mrs. Winters," she said. "The remaining balance can be set up on a payment plan if that would be helpful." "Yes, please," I agreed. Monthly payments would be ideal. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert about Meridian Global, the client whose presentation I had abandoned to be with Ethan in recovery. "Meridian signs with Pinnacle Marketing in multi-million-dollar deal," the headline read. I opened the article in disbelief. Despite my abrupt departure, Pinnacle had somehow secured the account. The piece quoted Meridian's CEO praising the agency's authentic approach and values-driven culture. There was even a mention of how impressed they had been when the presenting team prioritized a family emergency over business pressures. My phone rang almost immediately. It was Eleanor. "I assume you've seen the news," she said when I answered. "I wanted you to hear it from me first, but the press release went out earlier than expected." "How did this happen?" I asked. "I left, in the middle of the presentation." "After you left, I took over," Eleanor explained. "I told the Meridian team exactly what had happened, that our senior account manager had to return to her son's hospital bedside following heart surgery. I apologized for the interruption and offered to reschedule." She paused. "Their CEO, Sandra Mitchell, asked me how Pinnacle would handle the situation internally. Would you be penalized for choosing your son over the presentation? I told her absolutely not, that any company worth its values would support an employee in such circumstances." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "And that's why they signed with us?" Sandra later told me it was the deciding factor. Eleanor confirmed. Meridian had similar proposals from 3 agencies. They chose us because they wanted to work with a company that demonstrated its values in action, not just in marketing materials. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence, watching Ethan sleep peacefully on the couch. The irony was almost too perfect. The very situation Marcus and Diane had feared would cost Pinnacle the account had actually secured it. My unprofessional departure had become a demonstration of the agency's authentic values. The weeks of Ethan's recovery passed in a gentle rhythm of medication schedules, quiet games, reading sessions, and gradual increases in activity as his strength returned. I treasured this time with him, time I would have missed if I'd returned, to work immediately after his surgery. Jason took photos of our daily life, Ethan and me building elaborate Lego structures, baking cookies, creating a solar system mobile for his bedroom ceiling. Simple moments that would have been sacrificed to conference calls and client meetings in my previous reality. 6 weeks after Ethan's surgery, Dr. Sharma pronounced him ready to return to school part-time. His incision had healed into a thin pink line that would fade with time. His energy levels improved daily, and his follow-up tests showed his heart functioning perfectly. "He's doing exceptionally well," the cardiologist confirmed during our checkup. "I'd like to see him again in 3 months, but I don't anticipate any complications." That evening, as we celebrated with pizza and Ethan's favorite ice cream, I received an email from Eleanor asking if I'd be ready to discuss returning to Pinnacle the following week. The timing felt right. Ethan was healing well, and I was beginning to feel ready for new challenges. My first day back at Pinnacle felt surreal. The office looked the same: sleek, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic city views, the familiar hum of creative teams collaborating. But everything else had changed. Eleanor met me in the lobby personally, walking me to my new office on the executive floor, a spacious corner room with windows on 2 sides and my name on the door. Rebecca Winters, Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness. "We've announced your new role company-wide," she explained as I took in the space. "There's been an overwhelmingly positive response." "And Marcus and Diane?" I asked, setting my bag on the desk. "No longer with the company," Eleanor confirmed. "We reached separation agreements with both of them last week. Neither will be returning." She handed me a leather portfolio embossed with the Pinnacle logo. "This contains the formal job description we discussed, along with some initial priorities. I'd like you to consider, but I want to emphasize that you have considerable latitude to shape this role. You understand better than anyone what needs to change." After Eleanor left, I opened the portfolio to find a comprehensive outline of my new responsibilities: reviewing and revising all family leave policies, establishing clearer work-life boundaries, creating confidential reporting mechanisms for employees experiencing pressure or harassment, and developing training programs for managers focused on empathetic leadership. The last page contained a handwritten note from Eleanor. "Make Pinnacle the company I always intended it to be. I'm counting on you." I spent that first day back meeting with key stakeholders across the organization, from HR directors to creative team leaders. Everyone seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the new direction, though I noticed some middle managers appeared nervous about what these changes might mean for productivity and deadlines. By late afternoon, I'd filled a notebook with observations and ideas. The culture issues ran deeper than I'd realized. It wasn't just Marcus and Diane. Their approach had permeated much of the organization. Team members routinely skipped vacations, worked through illnesses, and missed family events for client demands. Many feared using their full allotment of personal days would signal a lack of commitment. I was drafting an outline for my first initiative, a family first response protocol, establishing clear guidelines for employee support during medical emergencies, when there was a knock at my door. A young woman entered tentatively. "Mrs. Winters?" I'm Alicia Chen from the creative team. Do you have a moment? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Of course, and please call me Rebecca. Alicia sat down, fidgeting with her silver bangle bracelet. I wanted to thank you, she said quietly. What you did, standing up to Marcus and Diane, it's already changing things around here. How so? I asked, curious. My daughter has type 1 diabetes, she explained. She had a severe hypoglycemic episode last month, and I had to leave. In the middle of a client meeting to get her from school. Marcus told me it didn't look good to the client and suggested I find more reliable childcare. My jaw tightened at the familiar pattern. I'm sorry that happened to you. After you sent that documentation to Eleanor, everything shifted, Alicia continued. My new supervisor, Alex, pulled me aside yesterday and asked if there were any accommodations I needed to better manage my daughter's condition. He suggested I could work flexible hours on days she has endocrinologist appointments. She smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I've been here 3 years and never felt I could ask for that kind of flexibility. Now it's being offered, without me even requesting it. After Alicia left, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about the ripple effects of speaking truth to power. My individual stand against workplace toxicity was already improving life for other working parents. The realization was both humbling and energizing. Over the following months, I implemented a series of changes that gradually transformed Pinnacle's culture. The Family First Response Protocol established clear procedures for supporting employees during family emergencies, including immediate paid leave, workload redistribution, and bonus protection. We created a confidential reporting system for employees experiencing undue pressure from managers. We revised performance metrics to focus on quality and impact rather than hours worked or constant availability. Perhaps most significantly, we instituted a guardian hours policy prohibiting non-emergency contact with employees outside of their scheduled work hours. The name was inspired by Ethan, who had asked one evening, "Mommy, who guards your time if you don't?" 9 months after my return to Pinnacle, Eleanor invited me to present our progress at the annual company meeting. Standing at the podium, before all 300 employees, I shared not only the policy changes we'd implemented, but also the personal story that had catalyzed them. I nearly missed my son waking up from heart surgery because I was presenting marketing slides, I told the silent audience. That moment forced me to recognize how deeply broken our workplace culture had become. But the real transformation began when I found the courage to document what was happening and speak truth to power. I gestured to Eleanor in the front row. Fortunately, we have leadership that was willing to listen and to act. Together, we're creating a company where no one has to choose between their family's well-being and their professional standing. The applause that followed was thunderous. Afterwards, a line of employees formed to speak with me, many sharing their own stories of previous impossible choices and newfound work-life balance. 1 year to the day after Ethan's surgery, I took him for his final follow-up appointment with Dr. Sharma. His heart function was perfect, his energy levels normal for an active 8-year-old. The scar on his chest had faded to a thin white line that he proudly called his superhero mark. He's officially cleared for all activities, Dr. Sharma announced with a smile. No restrictions whatsoever. Ethan pumped his fist in celebration. Does that mean I can try out for the soccer team? Absolutely, the doctor confirmed. Your heart is as strong as any child's now. That evening, we celebrated with a special dinner. As Jason served Ethan's favorite chocolate cake for dessert, our son made an unexpected announcement. I decided what I want to be when I grow up, he declared. I'm going to be a doctor who fixes hearts and a businessman who makes sure companies are nice to moms and dads. Jason and I exchanged amused glances. That's quite a career combination, Jason remarked. Ethan nodded seriously. Mom does both helping people and business. I can too. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed, Jason and I sat on our small balcony overlooking the marina, sharing a bottle of wine as we sometimes did on milestone days. "It's hard to believe it's been a year," Jason said, his hand finding mine in the gathering darkness. "So much has changed." I nodded, watching the lights from the boats reflect on the water. "Sometimes I still can't believe how it all turned out." When I sent that documentation to Eleanor, I was just trying to protect my job and get the bonus we needed for Ethan's medical bills. I never imagined it would lead to all this. "You did more than protect your job," Jason said. "You changed an entire company culture. You made things better for hundreds of other working parents." I thought about Alicia Chen and the dozens of other employees who had shared similar stories with me over the past year. Parents who no longer had to choose between their children's needs and their professional obligations. The ripple effects extended far beyond my own family now. "I suppose the lesson is that speaking up matters," I said, "even when it feels impossible, even when you think no one will listen." Jason squeezed my hand. "The right people will listen, and sometimes they'll even thank you for your courage." As we sat there in comfortable silence, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From the desperate mother taking conference calls during her son's heart surgery to the executive implementing company-wide cultural change, the transformation still felt surreal at times. But one thing had become crystal clear. No job is worth missing life's critical moments. No bonus is worth sacrificing your peace of mind. And sometimes, standing up for what's right doesn't end your career. It transforms it into something better than you could have imagined. The second year after Ethan's surgery brought new challenges I hadn't anticipated. As Pinnacle's Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness, I had successfully implemented the core policies that protected working parents and established healthier boundaries between professional and personal life. The guardian hours and family. First response protocol had become models that other companies in our industry were beginning to adopt. But cultural transformation runs deeper than policy changes, and I was discovering that some forms of resistance are far more subtle than others. It started with small comments in leadership meetings. "The Toronto team has concerns about response times since guardian hours went into effect," or "We lost the Westfield pitch. They went with an agency willing to provide 24/7 availability." Always delivered with a sympathetic tone, as if the speaker reluctantly acknowledged an unfortunate reality rather than actively undermining our new direction. Eleanor remained steadfastly supportive, shutting down these insinuations whenever she heard them. "We measure success by results, not by sacrificing our employees' well-being," she would say firmly. "If a client expects our team to compromise their health or family obligations, that's not a client we want." But Eleanor couldn't be in every meeting, and a quiet resistance continued behind the scenes. Some of the old guard, managers who had thrived under the previous high-pressure culture, found ways to signal their expectations without explicitly violating the new policies. They didn't demand weekend work. They just mentioned how impressive it was when certain team members went above and beyond. They didn't punish parents for attending their children's events. They just gave choice assignments to those with fewer outside commitments. One Tuesday morning in April, I was reviewing quarterly employee satisfaction metrics when my assistant, Michael, knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you," he said, looking uncomfortable. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Before I could respond, a young woman appeared behind him. "I'm sorry to barge in," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "but I didn't know who else to talk to." I recognized her from the creative department, a talented graphic designer named Olivia who had joined Pinnacle about 6 months earlier. "It's all right, Michael," I assured him. "Please come in, Olivia." She sat across from me, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her dark hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and shadows beneath her eyes suggested several sleepless nights. "I've been debating whether to come to you," she began. I don't want to cause trouble, but I don't know what else to do. I leaned forward, keeping my expression open and attentive. That's exactly why this position exists. What's happening? It's my manager, Steven, she said. He never explicitly asks me to work outside guardian hours, but he schedules impossible deadlines that can't be met during normal work hours. When I mention the guardian hours policy, he says of course I should respect it, but then adds that high performers find ways to make it work. The familiar pattern made my stomach tighten. How long has this been going on? Since I was assigned to his team 2 months ago, Olivia replied. At first, I thought maybe I was too slow or inefficient, so I tried streamlining my process. But the deadlines kept getting tighter, and the projects more complex. She took a deep breath. Last week, my daughter had her school play. I'd requested the time off 3 weeks in advance, and Stephen approved it. But the day before, he assigned me a major design revision for the Lakewood account, due the next morning. When I reminded him I'd be at my daughter's play, he said, "That's fine, but the client won't wait." He suggested I could probably handle it after the play. "What did you do?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "I stayed up until 3 a.m. finishing the revisions," she admitted, eyes downcast. My daughter was so excited I'd seen her performance, but I was so exhausted I could barely focus on her stories about it afterward. I've been running on fumes ever since, trying to keep up. I recognized the exhaustion in her face. The same bone-deep fatigue I'd experienced trying to balance Ethan's hospitalization with work demands. The very situation I'd vowed to eliminate from Pinnacle's culture. "Have you documented these incidents?" I asked. Olivia nodded and pulled out her phone. I started keeping notes after the second time it happened. Screenshots of the assignment times, the deadlines, my previously approved time-off requests. I even recorded a conversation where Stephen told me, "Guardian hours are great in theory, but in practice, client needs come first." May I see those records? As I reviewed Olivia's documentation, a knot formed in my chest. Stephen Murray had been with Pinnacle for 15 years, rising from junior designer to creative director of our largest division. He was considered a pillar of the company, known for consistently delivering award-winning work. He had also been one of the few directors who'd expressed reservations about the culture changes, though always carefully couched in terms of client satisfaction and competitive necessity. "Thank you for bringing this to me," I said when I'd finished reviewing her evidence. "What Stephen is doing violates both the letter and spirit of our policies. I'll address it immediately." Relief washed over Olivia's face. "I was afraid no one would believe me. He's so respected and I'm still new." "That's exactly why this kind of documentation is crucial," I told her. "It takes the issue beyond one person's word against another's." After Olivia left, I sat at my desk for several minutes, organizing my thoughts. This wasn't an isolated incident to be handled with a stern conversation. If a director was systematically undermining our workplace culture, others were almost certainly doing the same. We needed a comprehensive response. I pulled up our organizational chart and began to analyze recent project assignments, deadline, patterns, and team configurations. By mid-afternoon, a troubling pattern had emerged. 3 senior directors, Stephen in creative, Vanessa in media strategy, and Gerald in client relations, all showed similar patterns. Their teams reported higher after-hours work, more weekend activity on our project management system, and higher turnover rates than other departments. I scheduled a meeting with Eleanor for the following morning and prepared a detailed presentation outlining my findings. This would be a crucial test of Pinnacle's commitment to the cultural changes we'd implemented. Would the company be willing to confront senior leaders who were subverting our policies, or would status quo and client revenue win out? That evening, I arrived home later than usual. Jason had already prepared dinner, and Ethan was setting the table, carefully arranging the forks and knives just so. "Tough day?" Jason asked, noticing my preoccupied expression as I hung up my coat. Challenging, I admitted. I discovered some senior directors have been pressuring their teams to work outside guardian hours, not explicitly, but through impossible deadlines and subtle messaging. That's disappointing but not surprising, Jason said, stirring a pot of his famous chili. Cultural change is hard, especially when some people benefited from the old ways. Ethan looked up from his table setting. Are they the villains in your work story, Mom? I smiled despite my exhaustion. Since his surgery, Ethan had developed a fascination with stories about people standing up for what's right, something he called everyday heroes and villains. Not villains exactly, I explained, sitting down at the counter. Just people who are resistant to change, even when the change is good for everyone. Like when Tommy didn't want to try the new playground game even though it was more fun. Than the old one? He asked, referring to a recent recess dispute. Something like that, I agreed. Change can be scary, even for grown-ups. Jason set a bowl of chili in front of me. So what's your plan? Meeting with Eleanor tomorrow to present the evidence. Then we need to make some difficult decisions about how to handle senior leadership who won't adapt. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Jason found me at our kitchen table, still reviewing the data I'd gathered. You've built something important at Pinnacle, he said, sitting beside me. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that. The policies you've created have already helped so many families. I closed my laptop and leaned into his embrace. I know. I just hope it lasts. The next morning, I arrived at Eleanor's office 15 minutes early, my presentation polished and my determination firm. Her assistant showed me in promptly, at 9 a.m. You look serious, Eleanor observed as I set up my laptop. Should I be concerned? Yes, I said frankly. We have a significant cultural compliance issue with certain directors. I walked her through my findings, the pattern of excessive after-hours work in specific departments, the subtle pressure tactics described by Olivia and corroborated by exit interviews from departed employees, the metrics showing higher stress levels and lower satisfaction scores in teams led by Stephen, Vanessa, and Gerald. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When I finished, she was silent for several moments. These are 3 of our highest billing directors, she finally said. They consistently bring in our largest accounts. My heart sank. This was the moment of truth. Would revenue concerns outweigh employee well-being? Yes, I acknowledged. They're also systematically undermining the cultural changes we've worked so hard to implement. If we don't address this, we're sending a clear message that policies like guardian hours only apply if you're not on a high-performing team. Eleanor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. When I founded Pinnacle, I was 38 years old with 2 young children and a vision of a company where excellence didn't require sacrifice of personal well-being. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. She turned back to me. When you sent me that documentation a year ago, it was a wake-up call, a reminder of what Pinnacle was supposed to be. I won't let us backslide now. Relief washed over me. What do you want to do? Set up meetings with all 3 directors for today. I'll attend personally. They get one chance to commit fully to our culture, with specific, measurable changes to their management approach. If they can't or won't adapt, they can find agencies that better align with their values. Within hours, the meetings were arranged. One by one, Stephen, Vanessa, and Gerald were presented with the evidence of their policy circumvention. Eleanor led each conversation, with me providing supporting documentation and policy clarification. The responses were telling. Vanessa immediately recognized the problem, admitting she'd fallen back on old habits under client pressure. She committed to making concrete changes and asked for guidance on better workload management within guardian hours. Gerald was defensive, at first insisting client demands necessitated flexibility. But when Eleanor made it clear this was a decisive moment for his future at Pinnacle, he reluctantly agreed to adjust his approach. Stephen, however, remained unmoved. "These policies are hobbling our competitive edge," he insisted. "Our best work has always happened in those late-night sessions, those weekend sprints. The Lakewood campaign that won us 3 industry awards last month? That magic came from pushing beyond comfortable boundaries." "Creativity doesn't require exploitation," I countered. "It requires proper planning, adequate resources, and well-rested minds." "That's a lovely theory," Stephen said dismissively. "But 20 years in this business has taught me otherwise." Eleanor leaned forward. "Then perhaps it's time for you to apply those 20 years of experience somewhere else, Stephen. Pinnacle is committed to proving that exceptional work and humane working conditions are not mutually exclusive." The meeting ended with Stephen's departure from the company. Not immediately, but with a 3-month transition period to minimize disruption to his teams and clients. The news spread quickly through the office, creating both apprehension and hope. Some worried about client retention without Stephen's leadership. Others felt validated that the company was serious about maintaining its new culture. That evening, I called an all-hands meeting for Stephen's team to address their concerns directly. "I know many of you are wondering what happens next," I began, looking at the anxious faces before me. "First, I want to assure you that your jobs are secure. This transition isn't about downsizing. It's about ensuring our workplace practices align with our values." Olivia sat in the back row, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and apprehension. I hadn't identified her as the initial whistleblower, protecting her from potential backlash. "Over the next week, we'll be restructuring project timelines and client expectations to ensure all work can be completed within Guardian hours. This isn't lowering our standards. It's acknowledging that sustainable excellence requires sustainable practices." A senior designer named Marcus raised his hand. "But what about clients who expect 24/7 availability? Stephen always told us Lakewood would leave if we weren't constantly responsive." "That's a valid concern," I acknowledged. "We're already in communication with all clients to reset expectations." Interestingly, when we spoke with Lakewood's marketing director this afternoon, she was fully supportive of our Guardian Hours policy. She said, and I quote, "We don't want burned-out creatives working on our brand. We want fresh, innovative thinking." Surprise rippled through the room. The narrative that clients demanded constant availability was so deeply ingrained that many had never questioned it. "The truth is," I continued, "most clients respect reasonable boundaries when they're clearly established. For the few who truly require around-the-clock service, we'll implement rotating on-call schedules with appropriate compensation, ensuring no individual bears a disproportionate burden." By the time the meeting ended, the tension in the room had noticeably diminished. Several team members lingered afterward to share their experiences under Stephen's leadership. The missed family dinners, the vacation days spent answering emails, the constant anxiety about measuring up to unclear expectations. "I haven't had dinner with my kids before 8 p.m. in 2 years, one art director told me. "I thought that was just the price of success in this industry." In the weeks that followed, we implemented a comprehensive audit of all departments, identifying and addressing similar patterns of policy circumvention throughout the company. We developed clearer metrics for evaluating whether teams were truly honoring Guardian Hours and created anonymous reporting channels for employees experiencing pressure to work beyond established boundaries. Most significantly, we revised our client contracts to explicitly include our workplace policies, making Guardian Hours and our approach to work-life balance part of what clients were choosing when they selected Pinnacle. 3 months after Stephen's departure, the results were beginning to show. Employee satisfaction scores had improved across all departments, particularly in the formerly troubled areas. Turnover decreased by 23%, and contrary to the dire predictions about lost business, client retention remained strong. We had even secured 2 new major accounts specifically because of our reputation for ethical workplace practices. The Fenway Group chose us over 3 other agencies with more retail experience. Eleanor told me during our quarterly review. The ripples keep spreading. The metaphor of ripples stayed with me as I fell asleep that night and followed me into the office the next morning. Each policy change, each supported employee, each protected family moment created ripples that extended far beyond Pinnacle's walls. The senior director who could attend his son's baseball games without checking email between innings. The art director who took her first uninterrupted vacation in 5 years. The junior copywriter who could care for his elderly mother without fear of career repercussions. Each ripple carried the same message. Another way of working is possible. Success doesn't require sacrifice. Productivity and humanity are not opposing forces. And it had all begun with a single moment of courage in a hospital waiting room, choosing to document what was wrong rather than silently accepting it. 3 years after Ethan's surgery, I received an unexpected email that would once again alter the course of my professional life. The subject line read simply, "Workplace Culture Initiative, Request for Consultation." The sender was Catherine Delacroix, CEO of Meridian Global, the client whose presentation I had abandoned to be with Ethan in recovery. "Dear Ms. Winters," the message began, "your workplace transformation at Pinnacle Marketing has become something of a legend in corporate circles. We at Meridian are embarking on our own cultural reassessment and would value your expertise as an external consultant. Would you be available to discuss this opportunity at your convenience?" I sat back in my chair, surprised by the request. Over the past 3 years, I had occasionally spoken at industry conferences about Pinnacle's cultural transformation, but I had never considered consulting for other organizations. My work as Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness kept me fully engaged, with each quarter bringing new initiatives and refinements to our policies. After discussing the opportunity with Eleanor, who encouraged me to explore it, I arranged a video call with Catherine for the following week. She was forthright about Meridian's challenges. "We've been losing top talent to competitors with more progressive workplace policies," she explained. "Exit interviews consistently cite work-life conflict as the primary reason. The pandemic accelerated these departures. People realized they could work differently and still achieve results." Catherine went on to describe familiar patterns, implicit expectations of 24/7 availability, advancement that favored those without family responsibilities, and a pervasive fear of using existing benefits like parental leave or mental health days. "What caught my attention about Pinnacle's approach," she continued, "was how you managed to implement meaningful change without sacrificing client service or business outcomes. Most culture initiatives I've seen either lack substance or create operational challenges." I nodded, understanding her concern. The key was recognizing that these aren't opposing forces. Healthy, balanced employees actually deliver better results for clients than exhausted, resentful ones. By the end of our conversation, Catherine had proposed a 3-month consulting arrangement. I would assess Meridian's current culture, recommend specific policy changes, and help implement the initial phase of transformation. The compensation was substantial, enough to fully fund Ethan's college savings account with money left over. That evening, I discussed the opportunity with Jason over dinner while Ethan was at his weekly science club meeting. "It would mean some travel," I explained. "Probably 2 days a week in Chicago for the first month, then less frequent trips for implementation." Jason considered this while serving another helping of his signature lasagna. "How do you feel about traveling again? You've been home consistently since starting the director role." "That's part of what I'm weighing," I admitted. "I've cherished being fully present for you and Ethan these past years, but he's 10 now, more independent, and this would only be for 3 months." "I think you should do it," Jason said decisively. "This is a chance to extend the impact of your work beyond Pinnacle. The cultural changes you've implemented have made such a difference for families here in Seattle. Imagine doing that on a larger scale." His support meant everything. Since Ethan's surgery, we had made major decisions together, carefully weighing how each would affect our family balance. This opportunity felt different. Not a desperate choice between work and family, but a chance to help other families avoid such impossible choices. What about you and Ethan? The travel schedule would mean more solo parenting for you. Jason smiled. We'll manage. Besides, Ethan will love the chance to have guys' pizza nights while you're away. And maybe we could come visit Chicago one weekend? Make it an educational trip? 2 weeks later, I found myself in Meridian's sleek Chicago headquarters, beginning the cultural assessment phase. Catherine had arranged interviews with employees across all levels and departments, from executive leadership to entry-level staff. The patterns that emerged were troublingly familiar. I missed my daughter's dance recital last month because of an urgent client request that could have easily waited until Monday, a senior account manager told me. But saying no wasn't an option if I wanted to keep my position. I've been diagnosed with anxiety disorder directly related to work stress, shared a graphic designer. My therapist has suggested medical leave, but I've seen what happens to people who take extended time off here. They come back to find their projects reassigned and their advancement opportunities mysteriously vanished. A junior copywriter described crying in the bathroom after being criticized for taking 2 days off when her father was hospitalized. My supervisor said it raised questions about my commitment and that personal issues shouldn't affect professional obligations. Most disturbingly, these experiences weren't aberrations. They represented the norm at Meridian. The culture celebrated those who sacrificed personal well-being for work, while subtly punishing those who maintained boundaries. During my second week, I was reviewing employee survey data in a small conference room when an interruption came in the form of Anthony Reeves, Meridian's chief creative officer. He entered without knocking, his expression somewhere between curious and suspicious. "You're the culture consultant from Pinnacle," he stated, remaining standing though there were several empty chairs. "The one who's going to revolutionize our workplace." His tone made clear how he felt about that prospect. "I'm conducting an assessment of Meridian's current cultural practices," I clarified. "Any recommendations will be developed in partnership with your leadership team." Anthony leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Let me save you some time. Meridian succeeds because we're willing to do what others won't. Our clients choose us because they know we'll move mountains to meet their needs, any day, any hour. That dedication is our competitive advantage." I'd encountered this perspective many times, the belief that exceptional work required exceptional sacrifice. It was the same argument Stephen had made before leaving Pinnacle. "I understand that perspective," I said carefully. "But I'd challenge the assumption that client service and employee well-being are mutually exclusive. In fact, data suggests the opposite, that balanced, supported employees deliver more creative, effective work." Anthony's expression remained skeptical. "Data can be manipulated to support any agenda. I've been in this industry for 27 years. I've seen these wellness initiatives come and go. They sound wonderful in theory, but fall apart in practice. What aspects specifically concern you?" I asked, genuinely interested in his perspective. Resistance like Anthony's was often rooted in legitimate concerns about implementation challenges. "Take your guardian hours policy," he said. "Sounds lovely. No work communications after 6 p.m. or on weekends. But what happens when a major client has a crisis on Saturday? Do we just say, 'Sorry, we'll get back to you Monday'?" This was a question I'd answered countless times during Pinnacle's transition. Not at all. Guardian hours includes provisions for true emergencies. We implemented a rotating on-call system for weekends and after hours, with clear definitions of what constitutes an emergency and appropriate compensation for those who respond. "And how many client relationships did you lose in the process?" he challenged. "Initially, a few," I acknowledged. "Clients who truly required constant access to the same team members regardless of personal cost. But we gained more than we lost. clients who valued working with engaged creative professionals producing their best work rather than exhausted individuals operating at diminished capacity. Anthony remained unconvinced, but our conversation set the stage for the broader organizational dialogue about change. Over the following weeks, I discovered he represented a significant faction at Meridian, long-tenured leaders who equated dedication with constant availability and viewed work-life balance as a luxury rather than a necessity. By the end of my assessment phase, the cultural challenges at Meridian were clear, as were the potential paths forward. I prepared a comprehensive presentation for the executive team, focusing on both the human cost of the current culture and the business case for change. On a crisp October morning, I delivered my findings to Meridian's leadership team. The data spoke volumes: high turnover among top performers, particularly those with caregiving responsibilities, increasing medical leave for stress-related conditions, exit interviews showing competitor companies attracting talent specifically because of better work-life policies. The current approach isn't just harmful to your employees, I concluded. It's increasingly damaging to Meridian's business outcomes. You're losing institutional knowledge, spending heavily on recruiting and training replacements, and seeing declining innovation as creative teams operate in a perpetual state of exhaustion. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. What specific changes would you recommend as first steps? I outlined a phased approach, beginning with 3 key initiatives: implementing defined work boundaries similar to guardian hours, creating genuine protection for family and medical leave without career penalties, and establishing transparent, emergency response protocols that distributed urgent work fairly across teams rather than burdening the same individuals repeatedly. The discussion that followed was spirited. Anthony and several other executives raised concerns about client expectations and competitive pressures. Others, particularly younger leaders and those from the HR team, voiced strong support for the proposed changes. I'd like to move forward with a pilot program, Catherine announced after nearly 2 hours of debate. We'll implement these initial recommendations in 3 departments for a 3-month trial period, measure the outcomes, and then evaluate wider adoption. It wasn't the comprehensive transformation I'd hoped for, but it was a pragmatic starting point. Change of this magnitude rarely happens all at once, particularly in organizations with deeply ingrained cultural norms. The implementation phase began immediately, with marketing, research, and client services selected as the pilot departments. We developed detailed policies, conducted manager training sessions, and established clear metrics to evaluate success. Throughout the process, I worked closely with department heads to address specific concerns and adapt the framework to Meridian's unique operational needs. As expected, Anthony remained the most vocal skeptic. During a planning meeting for the client services pilot, he raised yet another objection. What happens when we lose the Astoria account because their point of contact isn't available at 9 p.m. on a Friday? He demanded. Lisa Chen, the client services director, responded before I could. Anthony, I lost my marriage largely because of those 9 p.m. Friday calls. Was keeping the Astoria account worth that? Because that's the real calculation we're talking about here. Her candor silenced the room. It was a powerful reminder of the actual stakes involved, not just abstract policies, but real human lives affected by workplace expectations. As the pilot programs took shape, I traveled between Chicago and Seattle, balancing my consulting work with my ongoing responsibilities at Pinnacle. True to his word, Jason managed things beautifully at home, sending me daily updates and occasional funny photos of the guys' nights he and Ethan enjoyed. During my 3rd trip to Chicago, Ethan asked to speak with me over video chat before bed, unusual for him as he typically preferred quick phone calls when I was traveling. "Mom, I need advice," he said solemnly when his face appeared on my hotel room screen. "There's this kid in my class, Zach. His dad had to go to the hospital. Yesterday, and today, the teacher got mad at him for not finishing his homework." My heart squeezed. That's tough. How did Zach seem today? Really sad and worried. He told me his mom stayed at the hospital all night, and there was no one to help him with the math problems. Ethan's expression was troubled. I tried to explain to Mrs. Winters that it wasn't fair to be mad at Zach because of his dad. But she said, classroom expectations don't change for personal circumstances. The phrase was jarringly familiar, almost identical to what Marcus had told me years ago when Ethan was hospitalized. The same toxic perspective that prioritized arbitrary deadlines over human needs, just in an educational context rather than a corporate one. What do you think I should do? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. I considered my response carefully. First, you were absolutely right to speak up for your friend. That was brave and kind. As for what to do next, maybe you could offer to help Zach catch up on the math he missed? And if you're comfortable, you could talk to your dad about it. He might have some perspective as a teacher. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Dad already said he could talk to Mrs. Winters teacher to teacher, but I was thinking maybe I could do something else too. What's that? Remember how you told me about documenting things when people aren't being fair at work? Maybe we could help Zach write down what happened, like evidence. Emotion welled up unexpectedly. My 10-year-old son had internalized one of the most important lessons from our family's journey, the power of documenting injustice as a first step toward addressing it. That's a wonderful idea, I told him, blinking back tears. Documentation creates a record that's harder to dismiss than just someone's word. It might help Zach's family if they need to talk to the principal. After we said goodnight, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, thinking about how our experiences shape not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us. Ethan wasn't just learning academic subjects in school. He was developing a moral framework that included standing up for others and challenging unfair systems. The next morning, I received an unexpected text from Jason. Proud parent moment. Ethan helped his friend document unfair treatment by teacher, presented to principal with dad. Accommodation granted for medical hardship. Your influence extends further than you know. That small victory, a child being granted grace during a family medical crisis, felt connected to the larger work I was doing at Meridian. Different contexts, different scales, but the same fundamental principle. Systems should serve human needs, not the other way around. As the pilot program at Meridian approached its halfway point, promising patterns began to emerge. Reported. Stress levels in the pilot departments decreased, while client satisfaction scores remained stable or slightly improved. There had been 2 weekend emergencies, both handled smoothly through the new on-call system without requiring the usual fire drill of all-hands response. Not everything went smoothly, of course. Some clients pushed back against the new boundaries, particularly those accustomed to immediate responses at all hours. A few managers struggled to adapt their planning and delegation practices to accommodate defined work hours. But the overall trajectory was positive, with employees reporting greater job satisfaction and improved work quality. During a mid-pilot review meeting, the conversation turned to expansion beyond the initial departments. Catherine asked for preliminary recommendations about next steps, assuming the final results confirmed the positive trends. I believe a phased rollout across all departments would be most effective, I suggested, starting with those most amenable to change and ending with those likely to offer the most resistance. Anthony, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the meeting, finally spoke up. I'd like my department to be next, he said, surprising everyone in the room. Assuming the final data supports proceeding, Catherine raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected, Anthony. You've been our most vocal skeptic about these changes. He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I've been observing the pilot teams, speaking with their members directly. The improvements in morale are noticeable. There was more to it than that. I could tell from his hesitation, but he didn't elaborate further in the group setting. Later that afternoon, as I was preparing to leave for the day, Anthony appeared in the doorway of my temporary office. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, less confrontational than during our previous interactions. "Of course." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's on your mind?" He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every day of his 59 years. "My daughter called me last night. She's expecting my first grandchild in February." A smile briefly softened his features, before fading. "She also told me she's terrified of becoming like me, someone who barely showed up for family because work always came first." The personal admission caught me off guard. That must have been difficult to hear. "It was," he acknowledged, "especially because she's right. I missed school plays, soccer games, dinner conversations. All for what? To be copied on emails at 11 p.m., to be the hero who saved client presentations on Christmas Eve?" He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I've always justified it as necessary for success, but watching these pilot teams maintain client relationships while also having personal lives, it's made me question whether I've been perpetuating a false choice." His vulnerability shifted my perception of him from opponent to potential ally, someone who had genuinely believed in the old ways but was now open to reconsidering. "It's never too late to change direction," I offered, both professionally and personally. Anthony nodded slowly. "I'd like to discuss implementing these policies in the creative department next, and I'd appreciate your guidance on how to lead that change effectively." That conversation marked a turning point in Meridian's transformation. With Anthony's influential support, resistance throughout the organization diminished significantly. By the end of the pilot period, the data strongly supported expanding the initiative company-wide, with client retention stable and employee retention notably improved. Catherine extended my consulting contract for an additional 2 months to oversee the full implementation. The expanded timeframe meant more time away from home, but Jason and Ethan flew to Chicago for a long weekend, turning the situation into an adventure rather than a hardship. We visited the Field Museum, took an architecture boat tour, and ate deep dish pizza that Ethan declared scientifically superior to our regular pizza at home. During our last night together before they returned to Seattle, we had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. Ethan, now developing the gangly limbs of early adolescence, enthusiastically recounted everything he'd learned about the city's famous buildings. "Did you know they reversed the flow of the Chicago River?" he asked, eyes wide with wonder at such engineering audacity. "They decided the direction it naturally went wasn't working, so they changed it." Jason caught my eye across the table, his expression amused. "Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Changing the established flow of things because the natural direction isn't working?" I smiled, appreciating the metaphor. Sometimes the most important changes seem impossible until they're done. Then people wonder why it took so long. As my work at Meridian neared completion, Catherine invited me to lunch at a small restaurant near the office. Over elegant plates of seared scallops and seasonal vegetables, she shared how the cultural transformation was affecting her personally. "I've taken a weekend completely offline for the first time in 15 years, she admitted. "I went hiking in Michigan with my partner. No email, no calls, nothing. The company didn't collapse, and I returned more clear-headed than I've been in ages." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "Leading by example is crucial for cultural change." Catherine nodded. "That's actually part of what I wanted to discuss today. We've been so impressed with your work here that we'd like to offer you a permanent position. Chief People Officer, reporting directly to me, with a mandate to continue and expand these cultural initiatives." The offer was flattering and came with compensation significantly higher than my role at Pinnacle. In another time, I might have leapt at such an opportunity. But now, I had different priorities. "I'm honored by the offer," I told her. "But my home is in Seattle. My family is there, and after everything we've been through, Being present for them is my non-negotiable. Rather than trying to persuade me, Catherine surprised me with an alternative. What about a hybrid arrangement? Quarterly visits to Chicago for strategic planning, but primarily remote work from Seattle? We're learning that physical location matters less than the right expertise and leadership. It was a generous compromise, but still not right for me. I appreciate your flexibility, but I've built something important at Pinnacle that I want to continue developing. And I believe you have internal talent capable of carrying this work forward with the right support and structure. Catherine looked disappointed but nodded her understanding. Can I at least convince you to consider consulting on similar projects in the future? Other organizations could benefit from your approach. This idea resonated more strongly. The work at Meridian had shown me that the cultural transformation we'd achieved at Pinnacle could be adapted for other organizations, expanding its impact far beyond one company. That, I said, is something I'd be very interested in exploring. On my final day at Meridian, Catherine hosted a small gathering to mark the completion of the project. Department heads from across the organization shared stories of how the new policies had affected their teams, from the account manager who had been able to coach his son's baseball team for the first time, to the art director who had finally sought treatment for her anxiety without fear of professional repercussions. Most surprisingly, Anthony approached me with a gift bag. A small token of appreciation, he said, handing it to me. Inside was a framed photograph of the Chicago skyline at sunset, along with a card. The handwritten note read, "Thank you for helping us build a better foundation. Some structures are worth reimagining entirely." As my flight carried me back to Seattle that evening, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 3 years. From the desperate mother taking conference calls during her son's heart surgery, to a change agent helping reshape workplace cultures beyond my own organization. The transformation still felt surreal at times, but one thing had become crystal clear. The impossible choice I'd faced during Ethan's surgery wasn't inevitable or necessary. It was the product of flawed systems that could be redesigned to serve both organizational goals and human needs. And I had found my calling in helping create that change, one workplace at a time. 5 years had passed since Ethan's heart surgery. He was now a confident, thoughtful 12-year-old with a passion for architecture and environmental science. The small scar on his chest had faded to a barely visible line, though he still proudly called it his superhero mark when telling the story to close friends. The medical crisis that had once threatened to tear our family apart had instead become the catalyst for profound transformation, not just for us, but for countless others. My consulting work had expanded beyond what I could have imagined. After the success at Meridian Global, word had spread through industry networks about the Winters method of workplace culture transformation. In the past 3 years, I had worked with 17 organizations across various sectors, from marketing agencies to tech companies, healthcare systems to educational institutions. Each engagement reinforced what I had come to see as a universal truth. People perform better when their humanity is honored rather than suppressed. I maintained my role as Director of Employee Advocacy and Wellness at Pinnacle, but Eleanor had restructured my position to accommodate quarterly consulting projects with other organizations. The arrangement allowed me to extend the impact of our workplace innovations while maintaining the stability and presence with my family that I valued so deeply. "Mom, it's here!" Ethan called from the front door one Tuesday afternoon. I looked up from my laptop to see him bursting into our living room, waving a large envelope. "Harvard Extension School, the Summer Architecture Program." My heart swelled with pride as he tore open the envelope and pulled out the acceptance letter. For months, he had worked on his application to the prestigious summer program for gifted middle schoolers, submitting a portfolio of his building designs and a thoughtful essay about creating spaces that help people feel safe and valued. "They liked my hospital redesign project," he exclaimed, pointing to a specific paragraph in the letter. the one where patient rooms have space for families to stay comfortably. The project had been inspired by our own experience during his hospitalization, the uncomfortable folding chair where I'd spent sleepless nights, the lack of privacy during difficult conversations with doctors, the absence of dedicated family spaces on the cardiac floor. Ethan had reimagined the entire unit with family support at the center of the design. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, giving him a hug. "I told you that project was special." Jason arrived home from school shortly after, bringing his characteristic energy through the door despite the fatigue of a full-day teaching art to elementary students. His face lit up when Ethan shared the news, and soon we were celebrating with an impromptu dance party in the kitchen, a family tradition for special announcements. Later that evening, while Ethan was video chatting with his grandmother about his acceptance, Jason and I stepped out onto our balcony with glasses of wine, enjoying the mild spring evening. "He wants to change the world through design," Jason mused, looking out at the marina. "Creating physical spaces that support human needs rather than ignoring them. Sound familiar?" I smiled at the parallel. Like mother, like son, just with buildings instead of policies. "It's remarkable how directly that experience shaped him," Jason said. "Not just the surgery itself, but everything that followed. Watching you transform a personal crisis into systemic change." I nodded, thinking about the thread that connected our family's journey to my professional evolution, and now to Ethan's emerging interests. It's as if he absorbed the lesson that systems, whether workplaces or hospitals or schools, should be designed around human flourishing, not the other way around. "Speaking of systems," Jason said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "I got an interesting call today. From Westridge Academy." I raised an eyebrow. Westridge was one of the most prestigious private schools in Seattle, known for its innovative curriculum and hefty tuition. What did they want? "They're creating a new position, Director of Arts Integration and Wellbeing. It would involve developing arts programming across all subject areas and implementing well-being initiatives for students and faculty." He took a sip of wine. "They want me to apply." "Jason, that's incredible. It sounds perfect for you." Over the years, he had become increasingly involved in advocating for arts education and teacher well-being within his district, often coming up against budgetary limitations and administrative resistance. "It would be a significant change," he admitted. "Higher salary, more influence, but also more responsibility. And I'd be leaving the classroom after 15 years. "What are you thinking?" I asked, knowing he would be wrestling with the decision. He gazed out at the boats gently rocking in the marina. "I'm thinking about impact. I love my students, but this role could potentially benefit thousands of kids and dozens of teachers. Creating systemic change rather than working within a broken system." I squeezed his hand, hearing the echo of my own journey in his words. "Sounds like someone I know." "I had a good teacher," he said with a smile. "Watching you these past 5 years, the courage it took to document what was wrong, the vision to imagine something better, the persistence to make it happen, it's inspired me to think differently about my own capacity for change." The following morning, I had a video call scheduled with Eleanor to discuss a potential consulting project with a national healthcare network. Their HR director had approached Pinnacle after reading an article about our workplace transformation in Harvard Business Review. "This would be our largest external project to date," Eleanor noted as we reviewed the preliminary information. 30,000 employees across 17 states. Their attrition rates among nursing staff are alarming, particularly among those with young children or elder care responsibilities. "The healthcare industry has some of the most deeply entrenched cultural issues," I observed. "The underlying belief that dedication requires suffering is practically baked into medical training." Eleanor nodded. "That's why they need your approach. Technical solutions won't address what's fundamentally a cultural problem." I spent the remainder of the day researching healthcare workplace dynamics and drafting an initial proposal. The scale of the project was daunting but exciting, an opportunity to improve working conditions for thousands of healthcare providers who, in turn, cared for countless patients. That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar Chicago number. It was Anthony Reeves, the once skeptical creative director from Meridian Global. "Rebecca," he said when I answered, "I hope I'm not disturbing your evening." "Not at all," I assured him, curious about the reason for his call. We had maintained occasional professional contact since the Meridian project, but rarely spoke directly. "How are things at Meridian?" "Transformed," he said simply. "The cultural changes have taken root in ways I wouldn't have believed possible 2 years ago. That's actually why I'm calling." He explained that several former Meridian executives had formed a business roundtable focused on workplace innovation. They were organizing a conference in San Francisco dedicated to human-centered organizational design and wanted me to deliver the keynote address. "Your work has become something of a case study," Anthony said, "not just at Pinnacle and Meridian, but across the industry. People are hungry to understand how cultural transformation can coexist with business success." I was flattered by the invitation, but hesitant about the timing. "When is the conference?" "October 15th through 17th. We're still finalizing the schedule, but we'd like you to speak on the opening day." October 15th. I quickly checked our family calendar on my phone and felt a pang of disappointment. That's the weekend of Ethan's regional science competition. He's been working on his project for months. I can't miss it. I expected Anthony to press or offer to rearrange the schedule, but instead he chuckled. 5 years ago, I would have tried to convince you that this opportunity was too important to pass up for a school event. Now, I'm going to suggest we look at virtual options instead. Perhaps a live-streamed keynote that allows you to be present for your son and still share your insights with our attendees. His response was a powerful reminder of how far we had come. Not just in policy changes, but in fundamental shifts to what was considered normal and acceptable in balancing work and family obligations. "A virtual keynote would be perfect," I agreed. "Thank you for understanding." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, struck by the symmetry of the moment. 5 years earlier, I had been pressured to choose between a presentation and my son's medical needs. Now my choice to prioritize his important event was met with accommodation and respect rather than judgment. The contrast illustrated everything I had been working toward. The following week brought another significant development. Jason had decided to apply for the position at Westridge Academy, and I was helping him prepare for his interview by reviewing his presentation on arts integration and well-being. "The research is clear," he explained, clicking through his slides. "Arts education doesn't just develop creativity. It improves cognitive function, builds emotional resilience, and fosters community connection. Yet it's consistently undervalued and underfunded, particularly in public education." I watched him with admiration, seeing the passion and expertise he had developed over years of teaching and advocacy. "This is compelling, Jason. You're connecting the dots between arts education and overall well-being in a way that makes the case for systemic change." He paused the presentation, looking thoughtful. "That's the heart of it, isn't it? Whether we're talking about workplace culture or educational approaches, it's about recognizing that systems should serve human flourishing rather than subordinating humans to systems." "Exactly," I agreed, struck by how precisely he had articulated the central principle that had guided my work. That's what unites all these seemingly different domains: workplaces, hospitals, schools. They're all human systems that too often prioritize efficiency or tradition over actual human needs. 2 days later, Jason received a call offering him the position at Westridge. The school had been so impressed with his vision that they had expedited their decision process. He would begin the new role in August, with the summer to develop his initial programming. That night, we shared the news with Ethan over a celebratory dinner at his favorite restaurant. His response reflected the thoughtful young man he was, becoming. "So now both of you are changing broken systems," he observed, dipping a French fry in ketchup. "Mom makes workplaces better for families, and Dad makes schools better for kids and teachers." Jason and I exchanged smiles across the table. "That's one way to look at it," I acknowledged. Ethan nodded seriously. "I think that's what I want to do too, but with buildings and cities, design spaces that actually work for the people who use them." The pride I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had experienced in my professional achievements. Our son had internalized not just the lesson of standing up against injustice, but the more profound understanding that systems could be reimagined and rebuilt to better serve humanity. The summer unfolded with a harmonious balance of work and family time that would have seemed impossible 5 years earlier. Jason developed his curriculum for Westridge, while Ethan attended the Harvard summer program, returning each evening full of architectural concepts and design principles. I divided my time between Pinnacle and preparing for the healthcare network consultation, with evenings and weekends dedicated entirely to family. In August, an unexpected email arrived from Dr. Sharma, the surgeon who had performed Ethan's heart operation. He was now the chief of pediatric cardiology at Seattle Children's Hospital and was developing a new patient family support initiative. "We've been following your work on workplace culture transformation," he wrote, "and believe similar principles could revolutionize how we support families during medical crises. Would you be willing to consult on this project? Your personal experience combined with your professional expertise would be invaluable." The invitation felt like the closing of a circle, returning to the very institution where our journey had begun, but now with the opportunity to help other families avoid the impossible choices we had faced. I immediately agreed to an initial meeting. When I shared the news with Jason and Ethan, they both immediately volunteered to participate as well. "I have lots of ideas for making hospitals better for kids," Ethan insisted, "like gaming rooms that are actually good, and places for parents to sleep that don't hurt their backs." The following week, the three of us met with Dr. Sharma and his team in the same hospital where Ethan had undergone surgery 5 years earlier. Walking through those corridors again brought back vivid memories. The fear, the exhaustion, the impossible pressure to choose between my son's needs and financial security. But this time, we weren't helpless within the system. We were partners in reimagining it. Dr. Sharma's initiative aimed to create comprehensive support for families facing pediatric medical crises, including workplace advocacy, financial navigation, emotional support, and practical assistance. He envisioned the hospital not just treating children's medical conditions, but addressing the entire ecosystem affecting their recovery, including their parents' ability to be present without professional or financial penalties. "We've seen too many parents forced to return to work during critical phases of their child's treatment," he explained. "Not because they want to, but because they fear losing their jobs or health insurance. It's a systemic failure that directly impacts patient outcomes." As the meeting progressed, Ethan contributed thoughtful insights about the physical environment from a child's perspective, while Jason offered ideas for using arts-based approaches to support emotional well-being for both patients and families. I shared frameworks for advocating with employers and documenting workplace policy violations, tools that could help families protect their rights during medical emergencies. By the end of the session, we had outlined a pilot program that integrated physical space redesign, policy advocacy, and holistic family support. Dr. Sharma asked if I would serve as an ongoing advisor as they developed and implemented the initiative. "We'd like to call it the Winters Family Protocol," he said, "since all three of you have contributed to its conception." As we left the hospital, I felt a profound sense of meaning in this evolution. What had begun as a personal crisis, a mother fighting for her child while battling workplace expectations, had grown into a movement for systemic change that now extended back to its point of origin, creating support for other families facing similar challenges. That evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset over the water, Jason raised his glass in a toast. "To the Winters family protocol," he said with a smile, "and to systems worth reimagining." Ethan lifted his soda. "And to superheroes, who don't wear capes." I clinked my glass against theirs, filled with gratitude for our journey. The crisis that had almost broken us, the courage that had sustained us, and the transformation that had rippled outward in ways we could never have imagined. 5 years ago, I had faced an impossible choice between my son's surgery and a presentation that could determine if we could pay for that very surgery. The cruel irony of that moment had sparked a movement for change that had transformed not just my workplace, but organizations across the country. The documentation I had created in desperation had become a template for others to advocate for themselves in similar circumstances. Most importantly, the cultural shifts we were creating would mean fewer parents facing such impossible choices in the future, fewer children wondering why work mattered more than their health, fewer families broken by systems that prioritized productivity over humanity. There was still much work to be done. Deeply entrenched cultural norms don't change overnight or even over years. But sitting there with my family, I felt a profound sense of hope. Each workplace policy we changed, each hospital protocol we improved, each educational approach we reimagined, brought us closer to a world where systems served human needs rather than the other way around. And it had all begun with a simple act of documentation, the courage to record what was wrong as the first step toward making it right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check. Them out! Their CEO said our approach to employee well-being aligned with their brand values. They wanted to work with a team that wasn't perpetually exhausted and resentful. On a personal level, the changes were equally significant. I was leaving the office by 5:30 p.m. most days, making it home for family dinner. I hadn't checked work email on a weekend in months, and for the first time since Ethan's surgery, I felt fully present in my life, not constantly divided between professional obligations and family needs. One Friday afternoon, as I was preparing to leave for the weekend, I received an unexpected visitor. Olivia knocked tentatively on my open door, looking markedly different from when I'd first met her. The shadows under her eyes had disappeared, replaced by a confident smile. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Of course." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "How are things going with the new structure?" "That's actually why I wanted to see you," she said, sitting down. "I just wanted to say thank you. The difference in our department is, it's like working at a completely different company." I smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. How specifically has it changed for you?" "I can plan my life again," she said, simply. "I know when my workday will end. I can commit to my daughter's school events without anxiety. Last week, I took her camping over the weekend without checking my phone once." She reached into her bag and pulled out a child's drawing, a colorful scene of stick figures around a campfire. "She made this for you, actually. I told her about the person who helped make Mommy's job better." The simple drawing brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for sharing this with me, and thank you for having the courage to speak up when things weren't right. That's what really started these changes." After Olivia left, I added her daughter's drawing to my bulletin board, next to photos of Ethan and notes from other employees whose lives had improved under our new policies. Each represented a ripple effect from that initial moment of standing up against toxic workplace culture. Small but significant improvements in countless lives. That evening, as Jason, Ethan, and I walked to our favorite neighborhood restaurant. For dinner, Ethan skipping ahead with the boundless energy of a healthy 9-year-old, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey that had begun with Ethan's heart surgery had transformed not just our family, but an entire company culture. The impossible choice I'd faced between my son's health and financial security had led to a workplace where such choices were no longer necessary. "Penny for your thoughts," Jason said, taking my hand as we walked. "I was just thinking about chains of events," I replied. "How something devastating can ultimately lead to something positive on a scale you never imagined. Like my super heart making mom a superhero at work?" Ethan called over his shoulder, demonstrating his habit of listening to adult conversations, even when appearing absorbed in his own activities. Jason laughed. "Exactly like that, buddy." As we settled into our usual booth at the restaurant, I watched Ethan study the children's menu with serious concentration, debating between chicken fingers and the mini burger. Such an ordinary moment. A family dinner on a Friday evening, yet one that had nearly been sacrificed to workplace expectations that prioritized client deadlines over human needs. "I got an interesting email today," Jason mentioned as we waited for our food. "Remember that art education conference I wanted to attend in Portland? The one I couldn't go to because the school wouldn't provide substitute coverage?" I nodded. Jason had been disappointed when his principal had denied his request, citing budget constraints. "The district just approved a new professional development policy for arts teachers," he continued. "Guaranteed coverage for 2 conferences per year, plus material stipends. The superintendent specifically mentioned wanting to support work-life balance for teachers." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for him. "What changed their minds?" Jason smiled. "Apparently, some parents from Pinnacle who have kids at schools in our district spoke to the superintendent about the importance of supporting teachers' professional growth and preventing burnout. They referenced your company's policies as a model." The revelation stunned me. The cultural changes at Pinnacle were extending beyond our organization, influencing other workplaces and institutions. The ripple effect was wider than I'd realized. "See?" Ethan said, looking up from his menu. "Superhero stuff." Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, I sat on our balcony, watching the boats in the marina and reflecting on the unexpected trajectory my career had taken. 2 years ago, I'd been a senior account manager focused on client acquisition and campaign metrics. Now I was helping reshape workplace culture not just within Pinnacle, but potentially across our industry. Jason joined me, handing me a glass of wine. "You seem contemplative tonight." "I'm thinking about scale," I admitted. "About how individual actions can create systemic change. Like a certain employee documentation that led to a corporate cultural transformation?" he suggested with a smile. "Exactly that," I agreed. "When I sent those documents to Eleanor, I was just trying to protect my job and get the bonus we needed for Ethan's medical bills. I never imagined it would lead to all of this." Jason leaned back in his chair, looking out at the water. "Maybe that's how meaningful change usually happens. Not from grand strategies, but from individual moments of courage that reveal what needs to be fixed. And from leaders willing to listen," I added, thinking of Eleanor's immediate response to my documentation. Without her receptiveness, nothing would have changed. "True," Jason acknowledged, "but someone had to speak first. Someone had to document the problem." We fell into comfortable silence, sipping our wine and enjoying the gentle evening breeze. After a while, Jason spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "You know, when Ethan was in surgery, I was terrified of losing him. But I was also afraid of what would happen to you if you lost your job for choosing him over that presentation." I turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. "You never told me that?" We were in crisis mode. It didn't seem helpful to add more fears to the pile. He took my hand. "But I remember thinking how brutally unfair it was that you had to make that choice at all. That the system was designed to punish parents for prioritizing their children in emergencies. That's what keeps me motivated in this new role," I said quietly, "making sure no one at Pinnacle ever faces that impossible choice again." Jason squeezed my hand. "And now you're helping other companies do the same."